Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. On this episode today, I'm very excited to have back Matt Lanza with Space City Weather. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you, Tim.
Awesome. Well, very excited. Like I said, we're going to be catching up on what has been going on with Space City Weather over the last year, and most importantly, talking about the 2022 hurricane season and what to expect. On Building Value, we go behind the scenes of building operations to showcase the people and products that make buildings work and the value they bring to the community. Well, we are back with Matt Lanza from Space City Weather. I'm very excited about this episode. I'm a huge fan of the website, and Matt was a great guest last year, so I'm excited he's back again to talk about just kind of what's been going on with Space City Weather and what we have to look forward to with this latest hurricane season. So, Matt, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tim. Yeah, thank you for having me back. It's good to be here again.
Awesome. Well, before we get right into the talking about hurricane season, I know there's been a lot of kind of change and growth within Space City over the last year. So can you kind of catch us up on what's been going on there?
Yeah, we've had a pretty exciting year with a lot of new things going on. We've, for one, have our new app, which I guess isn't new anymore since it's almost a year old, which is still kind of weird. But that's been great. Yeah. It's been a great way to reach a lot of our readers in sort of our goal is to kind of reach people where they are, right? And that's kind of what you have to do nowadays.
Sure.
And that's been great. So you can get that if you have an Android phone, Apple phone, if you haven't already. Go for it. Just search the App Store, Google Play, and you'll be able to find our Space City Weather app there. We also have launched a Spanish language co-site, basically, that is manned by Maria Santalongo, who has done a phenomenal job for us. Cool. Yeah, it's been great. We again reaching people where they are in the manner that they would like to receive their information is kind of a sort of the spirit of our site, and that's one thing we've tried to improve on. And if you know anybody that prefers reading their news in Spanish, that's kind of what we want to go for, and reach people that maybe don't get as much weather information as people that have more English speaking news sources. So just another way to be in touch with people. And then the site's just done what the site has done. It's been a little quieter this year, thankfully, which is, good. Hopefully it stays that way for a little longer. And we'll see what other fun things we have coming in the future.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the app. I still love getting the emails every morning, get the notification through the app. So definitely great information. And, if I'm connected with any of y'all on LinkedIn, I'm, definitely see that y'all are the only site I'll share out for weather information. And it's kind of funny. I have some buddies that are like, you know what? I don't even pay attention to the weather anymore. I know if it gets bad that you're going to send out the latest from Space City. So I'm like an intermediary weatherman for some people.
And it's so funny because what you're saying right now is actually where a lot of our readership ends up coming from, is just people like that are sharing with their social networks, their communities, their neighborhoods, whatever. And that's really what's, I think, made the site kind of successful and almost unique in a way.
Sure.
It's just that's sort of how, that's our marketing is our readers, which is great. And when you can build that kind of trust, I guess that you're doing something right. So that's what we hope to keep doing.
Absolutely. That was definitely the word I was going to go to, was trust. And, I think that's why we keep coming back to y'all. And we talked about that last year, the no hype. And so, definitely reliable source for anyone in the Houston Gulf Coast area, especially with hurricane season coming up. So great to hear the updates. Glad to hear y'all are still growing, and definitely happy to be a supporter and help get you some more readers where we can. So
we appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. What do we have on tap for 2022 hurricane season?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. So there's a number of reasons to think, unfortunately, that this is going to be another active hurricane season. Feels like we've been doing this since 2016, 2017. Just every single year has been busy. What we have in place is reminiscent of some more active hurricane seasons. I don't think this is going to be along the lines of what we saw a couple of years ago with all the activity in 2020 where it was just constant storms. I think this would be more like last year. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Please, anything but that.
Yes.
Last year was a pretty active hurricane season too, but we had two really nice long stretches of quiet. I think it was from like mid-July through mid to late August that we had very few storms, and then again from pretty much like after Hurricane Nicholas came through in September, things really quieted down the back half of the month and into October, and that was really it, which was nice for a change. We have not had those stretches the last few years that have been quiet, so hopefully that means we're kind of unwinding out of this period, and maybe we'll have another active season, but it won't be insanely active, like as 2017 or 2020. So that's kind of what we're hoping for.
Right.
Whether or not it's active in the Gulf versus active in the Atlantic, we can't really say. But there's a couple interesting things about this year that we can talk about as we go through.
Yeah. So I mean, it definitely in Louisiana last year just got hammered, and hopefully they get a little reprieve this year. Not that I'm asking for it to come towards us, but maybe we can all, take a little bit of a break this year. But hopefully, if it is a little more active than usual, that they're maybe not as intense as some of the other storms. So, are there any forecasts out there or kind of indications of how many storms we're looking at, or how intense they're going to be? And just kind of maybe a broader question is, what's driving the forecast? Like, how are y'all determining that we're going to see this many hurricanes?
Yes, so there's a couple things. In terms of the number of storms, last year we had about 21 of them, and I think it was 7 of them were hurricanes, which it's active but not super active. I would expect something along the lines of that this year. Getting 6 or 7 hurricanes in a hurricane season is kind of normal now. So that, should be pretty close to average, but the number of storms may be a little bit higher. Some of that is geared toward how we name storms now. And it's a lot easier to name something that maybe even as recently as 15 or 20 years ago wouldn't have gotten a name, just because we have so much better technology. So we sort of talk in the background, and even some folks at the National Hurricane Center have discussed this as well, almost like a storm inflation, where, because of how we do things, we actually end up with more storms now than we used to, just because of how we do it. It's not so much that the season's that much more active, although 2020 was pretty much as active as the number of storms suggested. But one of the things we've been dealing with the last couple of years is this La Nina, which is in the tropical Pacific. You've got the waters around the equator. When they're warmer than normal, that's what everybody knows as El Nino. But then you have the opposite of that. When they're colder than normal, that's what we call La Nina. And when you have La Nina, what happens is the trade winds that usually go across the Pacific Ocean into the Atlantic Ocean tend to weaken. So that does tend to weaken wind shear. Now, wind shear alone is not going to tear a hurricane apart, but it will help to generally keep a lid on things. So the less wind shear you have, or the less strong winds pushing across the Atlantic Ocean you have, the more likely it is that you're going to have a more hospitable environment for tropical storms or hurricanes to develop in. So that's a key factor in the reason, number one, it's been active the last few years, and number two, why this year is again expected to be active. We still have that La Nina in place, which is actually a little strange. This would be, I think, the 3rd hurricane season in a row that we have that. That does not happen very often historically, that you have this sort of setup. So a little bit of a unique situation. The other reason is water temperatures. We've been so much warmer in the Atlantic Ocean. We've been warmer in the Gulf of Mexico. And that has just been a pure, perfect breeding ground for anything to kind of spin up. It just gets in the most remotely favorable environment, and it can just go off and develop pretty quickly. So, we've got that again this year. The tropics are a little bit maybe cooler than normal right now. That could change over the next, several weeks. But once you get into the mid-latitudes, further up into the Atlantic, it gets a little bit warmer. So maybe the storms will be more apt to develop further north than usual this year, which wouldn't impact us, further out into the Atlantic. But with the Gulf being probably warm, that's certainly going to be in place, I think, going into this summer. And one of the things that will be very interesting from a Texas-centric perspective is whether or not we have a drought. And I've been harping on that lately to a lot of people that I've been talking to, because we've already have kind of a bit of a drought in our area. If you go into West Texas, it's a pretty bad drought already.
Right.
And looking the next couple of weeks from when we're recording this, doesn't look like we're gonna get that much rain. And we're gonna have temperatures in the 90s. It's gonna feel more like mid to late June than mid to late May, or early to mid May, I guess. And as that happens, if you have a pattern that sets up, you can almost set up a bubble over Texas that sort of protects it from hurricanes, which is both good and bad. Good because we don't have to deal with hurricanes, but bad because they're just not getting the rain.
No rain.
So, and that creates a whole other set of problems. So we'll see. It could be an active season. It may not be active for us, or the drought could break down. We've had, we've come close to going into drought the last year and a half a few times, and every time it's come close, we've been bailed out by something. So we'll see what happens. But a lot of interesting little nuances to watch this year.
Yeah, that's a lot of kind of factors all going into it, and I can see why it's so difficult to predict the weather with any sort of certainty, just, given all the little things that you've talked about. And, I still, every time I hear about El Nino and La Nina, I always think about Chris Farley, the old joke about, for all you non-Spanish speakers out there, El Nino means the Nino,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
So I, just laughing in the back of my head a little bit when I hear that, but it's kind of funny to, be reminded of what that impact is and that it is significant. So like you said, going to be interesting to see how that plays out this year. And on one hand, I'd hate to have a drought, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we didn't have a bunch of hurricanes. So, I guess picking the lesser of two evils
right.
there. So what do you feel like would maybe be some things for people to look out, either specifically for this year for hurricane season or just kind of general preparation?
Yeah, it's always good to kind of be prepared. One of the things we're trying to work on in the background actually on the site is to come up with almost like a resources page, because a lot of times we realize that during these storm events, we're constantly having to look and find information to share with people. Like, all right, well, if you have, if you need to know this, or this, here's the information.
Right.
So we're trying to make that easier for people. I don't know if that's going to get done by the start of hurricane season or not, but hopefully sometime during the season we'll have that. But in the meantime, things you can do. First and foremost, know if you're in an evacuation zone, which you can search for. Harris County has sites for that information. Galveston County has sites for that information. Brazoria County as well. All the coastal counties. You can determine if you are in an evacuation zone. If you live inland in places like Katy or northwest of Houston, you're not going to be in an evacuation zone, but you should still have preparations in place. Going into hurricane season, it's always good to be stocked with several days of water. And some non-perishable foods as well, because you have to assume that it's going to take several days if there's a really catastrophic hurricane for help to just kind of get in to the area.
Right.
We've seen so many stories of this happen time and time again in different places where power's out, everything's out, people can't get to the area, so it's 3 or 4 days before anybody even gets there to really get things set up and have relief arrive in case you need it. So you're your own best preparer for that stuff.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
it's very important to try and do that if you can. And obviously have other essentials like batteries. A radio is very good because that's going to be the one way you're going to want to get information. I know, talking about like generators, that's sort of getting into more of the bigger ticket type stuff. Just keep in mind that, with supply chain issues and everything else that's going on, it's not going to be that you can just go to your local store and say, I want a generator and get it tomorrow.
Right.
It's good to be prepared for that and understand it's going to take several weeks to months before that gets done. So if it's something you're considering and you're on the fence with, maybe now's the time to start getting that in place. Another thing to do that we tell everybody all the time, hurricane season or not, flood insurance. Have flood insurance, whether you've flooded in the past or not.
Absolutely.
Because the one thing a lot of people say still is like, well, I didn't flood during Harvey. And I say that's great. Harvey was about as bad a storm as you'll ever have here. But for your particular neighborhood, it may not have been. If you get 6 inches of rain in an hour from just a thunderstorm that sits over you, your house could still flood. Whether you flooded in Harvey or not. So if you live in the area, have flood insurance. Very, very important. And keep in mind, again, with hurricane season coming up, it takes, I think, 30 days for that to go into effect. So something you've been on the fence with, tomorrow go out and do it.
Go ahead and buy it.
So
yes,
those are sort of the key things I tell people ahead of hurricane season.
Yeah, those are great. Definitely good pieces of advice. And some of the websites that I've shared before in the past have a lot of the similar info, like the readyharris.org has some good information, National Hurricane Center. And then the Harris County Flood Warning System, I think we talked about that last year. That's a really good website to be able to track, the watersheds and water levels and rainfall and all of that, set up alerts and get notified that things are happening. And the definitely we do. I think it's a gallon of water per person a day is the recommendation. Yes. And I found some really cool collapsible bottles on Amazon, and then I think it's called the Bob. It literally fills up your toilet, or not your toilet, your tub.
Right.
Please don't fill up water from this. It fills up water from your tub. Yes. You basically fill up your tub with this giant bag, and you can pump water out of it. So, I mean, it only worked once. The kids wanted to play with the pump, and then it was kind of ruined. But,
always.
But all little things that you can do, and like you said with generators, those are really tough to get. And can be difficult to deal with all the gas and all of that if you're not hooked up to natural gas or propane. But those big giant battery packs have become, pretty affordable and a good option for, especially if you have a CPAP or something like that, making sure that you got a big one to be able to power it. So all great advice, and definitely on the commercial level, this is definitely the time to be making sure that your sump pumps work, and then all of your, backup generation and everything is ready to go. I'm sure everybody's starting to go down those checklists, but definitely sooner the better to get all of those things prepared. So awesome. Well, any other kind of anything that we missed on the hurricane season this year, or anything with Space City in general that you want to make sure pass on to everybody?
Yeah, and I think the one thing I always remind people of is just be careful during hurricane season with how you get your information. And this is not necessarily, obviously I'm plugging our site, but at the same time, there are other trustworthy sources you may like better, you may want to use, and that's fine, use them. But just be careful, particularly on Facebook and YouTube. Those seem to be the worst offenders of just really horrible takes on weather information. Someone will post a model image that's 384 hours in the future and just no context, and they'll say something along the lines of, this isn't a forecast, this is just a model, but just want you to know, look, there might be a hurricane in 2 weeks. And it's just kind of all right.
And it's going to be the worst one of all time. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And you're in the cone of impending doom. You're going to die.
If I had $1 for every time some of these long-range models showed gigantic hurricanes slamming into Houston on days 10 to 15, I'd be retired. It's just, it happens so many times. Even last year, Hurricane Ida, I don't know if people remember this or not, but that developed within about 3 days between when it was nothing to when it made landfall in Louisiana. But in the 2 or 3 days prior to that, there was modeling that was barreling it right into Texas as big as it was, and that kind of made me a little nervous, of course, but when you looked under the hood at what these models were saying, it was evident that this was not a cut and dry situation where you can just throw a map up there and be like, hey, look, coming for you. No, there was a whole, huge deviation of potential tracks from where it could go. So, that's why, I don't, I don't like to talk down to people at all. Like, I'm the expert, but there's a reason we do what we do. We can go through all this stuff. We understand it. We translate it, and we promise we're not hiding anything from people. That's the most common thing that I hear is that, oh, why aren't you telling us about that one model? Like, because we're not. There's no reason to tell you about it because it's 12 days out. It doesn't mean anything.
Reliable, yeah.
So just trust us to go through it and help you, and you'll know when it's time to worry about something. Believe me.
Yep. Yeah, but I remember, looking back at some of the past hurricanes, you can definitely tell, okay, this is now an issue. We really need to take these seriously. You can see it in the blog posts, and you can tell when you're like, okay, if they're taking it this seriously, I know I need to get my stuff in order.
And that's exactly why we try and be boring 90% of the time. We don't want to do anything over the top, because we want to save that for when we need it. And around here, you need it at some point. So,
and that's good. And you mentioned Facebook, but some of the other things that were going around were the text message, the copy and paste text message was like, oh, well, my brother-in-law works in City Hall and blah 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 blah.
Right.
And you're like, I don't know if I can really trust that or not.
Yeah, you really have to verify anything you see during hurricanes. I mean, really any time of year, but especially during hurricane season, because the one thing that, and we empathize with people around here that have just been snake bitten so many times by flooding or whatever, the freeze and all that, is that we understand that people are on edge constantly. There's always that looming disaster in the back of your mind that's going to hit the area. So we try to make sure that we take that into account when we're talking to people. We don't want to needlessly scare you when we don't have to. And honestly, as much of a bad rap as media in general gets, any meteorologist that works in Houston will tell you the same thing. They're just trying to inform where they can. So the whole way that the media goes about it sometimes can be a little cumbersome, but for the meteorologists themselves, they're sharing what they know, and they're trying not to overhype things when they can, but we're definitely doing that as well, and you can rely on us throughout the season to keep you posted.
Hey, and we appreciate it. Y'all are doing a great job, and congratulations on all the growth and new things going on with Space City. Happy to see that, and definitely appreciate what y'all are doing, and you'll be, definitely, I'll be tuning in every day, making sure staying up to date on what's going on, because I know I've got my buddies that are waiting to for me to pass it on to them. So, but man, I definitely appreciate having you on the show again. Always great talking with you, and glad we're able to do it again.
Yes, Tim, thanks a lot for having me again, and thanks for being one of our most loyal followers for a long time. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Well, also want to thank everybody for watching or listening to this episode of Building Value, and we hope to see you on the next one.